Hi, this is the Democratic Alliance Labour Report, our weekly Labour Report. Thank you for tuning in. This is Sunday, the 14th of November, 2021. I'm going to concentrate on this report entirely on one topic, and that is the COVID-19 vaccinations and possible injury arising therefrom and insurance that comes from possible injuries arising from the COVID-19 vaccination. So thank you once again. Sunday the 14th of November 2021, the Democratic Labour Report, and this is Michael Bagram. What has happened is obviously many people are fearful of having the vaccination. Many workplaces are now implementing compulsory vaccination. In other words, they're saying that if you don't have the vaccination, then you can possibly lead yourself to a retrenchment, a dismissal, and operational requirements of the business. Now, what is interesting is that many people, and I've been talking to literally dozens of employers and thousands of employees over the past few months, many people are a bit worried about the vaccination. I don't think there's much to be worried about. Many people are saying they would have it, but what about the complications? What about the fallout? What about the side effects of this vaccination? Now, I must add at this point, over these past 6 months, I have been talking to many employees and trade unions who are telling me that they haven't got anything to report in terms of side effects. Sometimes, yes, people are off for a day or two, and many employers are saying, don't worry, we're not going to take it off your sick leave, we're not going to take it off leave. We just need to know that you have had the vaccination and you've had a little bit of a reaction, but never has the reaction been more than 2 days. Yes, there are some issues where people get COVID and have the long COVID, and that's created issues. And you can avoid all that by the vaccination. Now, what has happened is that the compensation fund, Mr. Vuyo Mafata, who is the commissioner of the compensation fund, has put together a plan, and I think it's a pretty good plan. Obviously, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Whether they're going to pay out or not, well, it's very much up in the air. We haven't had any claims that I know of against the compensation fund for bad reaction from the vaccination. But in terms of a special notice, in terms of the Government Gazette that was put out, it was signed on the 18th of August 21, but it's now active. They're saying that they are producing a policy for vaccination side effects. That policy is obviously compensation to the employee who has had side effects when the employer has insisted on the vaccination. So that compensation cover will cover employees for injuries, illness, or death as a result of receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. Now, we haven't had any deaths, so don't get any worries about that. But I've had to speak to many employees who tell me that they are worried about the side effects, and I am explaining to them that I haven't seen any side effects on this, but in fact they do have cover in terms of the compensation fund. Obviously, the employee is required by the employer to receive the vaccination, so that must be the first step. You can't claim the cover for the vaccination if it's not a compulsory thing at the workplace. So it's got to first be compulsory at the workplace, and it must be an inherent requirement of employment. So the employer has to go through that consultation process with the employees to explain why it's an inherent requirement, and then in line with the inherent requirement, the employee would then go and have the vaccination, and only then, if the employee has side effects and is off work for a period of time or has damages or some problem that are resultant of that vaccination, then the cover would kick in. Now, there are requirements, there are following requirements that have been outlined by the department. Obviously, the vaccination must be regarded as an inherent requirement of the job as determined by the employer's risk assessment. So the employer must do a proper risk assessment and say this is an inherent requirement, you must have the jab. So that's the first step. The second step is The vaccination can't be just any vaccination. It must be one of the recognized ones. For instance, the ones that you would get through the government. You can't have some sham vaccination and then claim that you are injured or something as a result of it. It must be the Health Association approved vaccination. It must be the approved COVID-19 vaccination. Then there must be evidence that must be provided of the employer's risk assessment. So the employer would have to have a risk assessment on paper, and I'm recommending that all employers have the risk assessment done, and they must have a vaccination plan put together. I have been reading many of these and put some together, but the Democratic Alliance has strongly recommended that every single business puts together a proper risk assessment, a proper plan for vaccination, so that you can in turn produce that if there's a problem, if an employee challenges it, or the Department of Employment and Labour challenges it. So you must have that. Then once you have that, and the employee is vaccinated and then feels that there is some illness as a result from the vaccination, you've got to have a chronological sequence. You can't have the illness coming up 6 months later. It's got to be having the jab and then showing within a day or two that the illness has arisen or there's some sort of risk that has arisen, and then you would report that to the Department of Employment and Labour, and in fact report it to the Department of Health. So it would be a chronological sequence after the vaccine inoculation and the development of the symptoms. It would be obviously not acceptable to have symptoms developed in a year's time or something and then try and claim. Then, of course, the employee must have presented with the symptoms and the clinical signs that are generally recognized as side effects of the COVID-19 vaccination. So it wouldn't help if you say, I've had the vaccination and now what's happened is I've developed, I don't know, a broken foot or something. It's not the symptoms that one would expect, and you can't then claim for that, or you can't claim that I had a motor accident because of the symptoms of the vaccination. That's not going to be acceptable. And then, of course, the department also might insist on additional tests from the employee. In other words, they might say that we want to send you into hospital, have additional tests to test whether in fact you can claim for the result of the COVID-19 vaccination. Obviously, that claim would be adjudicated, and then compensation will be assessed, and you can challenge that if you so wish. So it's an important aspect when the staff are saying that they are worried about the outcome of the vaccination, they're worried about getting sick, they're worried about all sorts of other things that are arising out of the vaccination. You can assure staff that, in fact, the Department of Employment and Labour, through the Compensation Fund, have put together a proper policy to ensure that if anyone does get ill, that they will be compensated and they will be properly sorted out from this. That being said, like I had said right in the beginning of this discussion, that I haven't come across anyone that has come out with a need to claim. I have been speaking literally to hundreds of people, and dozens of companies have sent their staff because of their policy now of vaccination. So thank you once again for listening to me. It's Michael Bagram. This is the Democratic Alliance Labour Report, Sunday the 14th of November 2021. If you're happy with this, please post it on your Facebook page, send it on to friends. I really appreciate that. Do keep well.